Live from Entity Studios, here's your host, Bob Kistler.
We would like to welcome you to the initial podcast of the Pennsylvania Taxpayer Cyber Coalition channel. Today, and in further broadcast, we will discuss the facts and myths surrounding the Property Tax Independence Act, better known as Senate Bill 76. I'm Bob Kistler.
And I'm Steve Trainer. Welcome. We hope you enjoy the show.
Steve, there's much information out there about 76 being published that is erroneous, and it's based on reports issued by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, the Pennsylvania School Board Association, and the Keystone Research Center, as well as others.
Sadly, yes, there is, Bob. As we begin our series of educational segments, we will lay out the facts while dispelling the myths. Tonight we will discuss the claim that Senate Bill 76 will not adequately fund our schools. In addition to the organizations mentioned, there are legislators who use this deceitful talking point as a reason they do not support the bill by ambiguously stating the numbers do not work.
Absolutely correct, Steve. The revenue to fund schools under Senate Bill 76 would come from a tax shift, that being state sales and use tax, and that would be increased from 6 to 7%, and the base expanded. Currently, Pennsylvania has one of the narrowest tax bases in the nation. Personal income tax would increase from 3.07% to 4.95%. The tax shift is a guaranteed, and I repeat that word and emphasize it, it's a guaranteed dollar-for-dollar replacement of funds raised by property taxes. The bill was vetted twice by the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office. The numbers work, despite what you might be hearing from these other organizations.
Well, yes, Bob. Where the misconception arises from is that under Senate Bill 76, school district annual funding increases would be tied to an inflation index. Doing this is a direct measure of the taxpayer's ability to pay. Over the past 20 years, property taxes have risen much greater than inflation or average weekly wages, resulting in a great financial distress for many families across Pennsylvania.
Once again, correct, Steve. School districts would be placed on a real-world budget, just as every family all across Pennsylvania faces every year. Within this umbrella of assertions that the numbers do not work, there are claims that SUT being state sales use and use tax, and PIT being personal income tax, that they'll fall short during recessions, and that in place of annual property taxes increases, the taxpayer would be faced with annual SUT and PIT increases. I can actually understand where an uninformed individual may reach this conclusion, but it's completely false.
Here's a table produced by the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office analysis of Senate Bill 76 that projects yearly school district revenue increases. But before we review the number in the table, we must first understand that the needed revenue to fund schools coming from the taxpayer has been falsely inflated. Currently, $12.6 billion of taxpayer money is needed to fund our schools, but $2 billion is directed towards paying down debt service. Under Senate Bill 76, debt is separated and paid separately. The reason for this is that nearly every school district has debt, but the amount of term debt varies significantly. There is no fair way to include this variability into the SUT or PIT funding. This actually brings up another falsehood being widely shared. The naysayers claim that Senate Bill 76 does not eliminate property taxes. It is true that the taxpayers of each school district must pay off existing debts, but once paid off, school district property taxes will end forever. No new debt may be added. This topic will be touched upon more in detail in the future broadcast. Due to the $2 billion debt service, the true amount of revenue that needs to be raised by way of SUT and PIT is currently $10.6 billion in lieu of the $12.6 billion. Remember this number as we review this data in the table. As you can see, the chart reveals that SUT and PIT annual revenue increases exceed the current school district revenue demand of $10.6 billion on the taxpayer. Not only is the needed revenue exceeded, but annual revenue increases are projected at greater than 4%.
Okay, if you look at the chart, you can actually see that this chart was produced in 2013, or this table, I'm sorry. And in 2014-15, the projection was 11.19 billion, which already exceeds the 10.6 billion of today's demands. So, anyhow, how's all this possible without increasing SUT and PIT annually?
Well, the data is based on historical wage trends. As annual wages increase, SUT and PIT revenue intrinsically increase. Unless the state needs revenue for other needs, funding of our schools in this manner should never result in increasing SUT or PIT. Property taxes increase annually where SUT and PIT increase. The increases on that occurs in terms of decades. Half of our state budget is dedicated to funding schools. The Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office team behind the analysis of Senate Bill 76 are fully aware that the accuracy of the reporting is paramount. Their entire state economy is based on their analysis. Clearly, they did not take this analysis lightly.
Thank you for that summary, Steve. That was great, and I'm sure our viewers found it very enlightening. With regard to economic recession concerns, here is a chart that was once again produced by the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office during their analysis of Senate Bill 76. You can see the chart demonstrates that during recessions, even as one as severe as the 2008 economic crisis, widely considered to be the worst recession since the 1929 Depression, sufficient revenue to fund schools is generated. On the chart, you can see that SUT and PIT annual increases remain above the inflation index, which is roughly what annual school funding increases would be tied to.
This chart points out why the naysayers claim the bill would inadequately fund our schools. The bill will provide annual funding increases in line with an inflation metric. It will, however, end the open taxpayer wallet and let's take what we can get current method of funding schools. To further drive home the unsustainable nature of rising property taxes, Figure 4.1 chart was modified by the ptcc. That's the Pennsylvania Taxpayer Cyber Coalition. The SUT and the PIT data was removed and average weekly wage data was added. This was done to clearly show how dramatically school property taxes are far outstripping CPI and average weekly wage increases. CPI coupled with the AWW is a direct measure of a family's ability to pay.
Once again, thank you, Steve. Very enlightening. After watching tonight's podcast and sharing the facts, you might be told that Act 1 protects the taxpayer. Once again, this is a complete fallacy. Act 1 loopholes permit school districts to exceed state guidelines for current year allowed property tax increases. Each year, roughly half our schools apply for Act 1 exemptions, and they are rubber stamped by the state. Rarely is a request denied.
Honestly, Bob, it's mind-boggling how data has been manipulated to paint a bleak picture of the Property Tax Independence Act.
I could not agree more with you, Steve, and that is why we are here. In a world that is sadly filled with politicians and news media that bend the facts, at times flat out lie, and report fake news, the viewers deserve unmanipulated facts. In the word of Dragnet Jack Webb, just the facts, man.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's show and look forward to future broadcasts. We will endeavor to reveal the truth. I'm Steve Trainer.
And I'm Bob Kistler. Good night.